What if the most disturbing truth about archaeology is not what has been discovered, but what still cannot be explained? Why would an Egyptian mummy be sealed behind perfect geometric squares as if its identity had to be locked away? Why were hundreds of human skulls fused into a single structure at the heart of an empire? Why does a monk's body remain preserved after 6 centuries, without chemicals, without embalming, without decay? These are not myths. These are not legends. They are real archaeological finds, documented, excavated, and studied, yet still resisting clear explanation. If all of this truly happened, then one question remains unavoidable. What part of human history are we still failing to understand? Archaeology is often presented as a discipline of certainty. Layers are dated, artifacts are cataloged, civilizations are placed neatly on timelines. From a distance, it appears that the past has already been mapped, measured, and explained. But that impression is misleading. In reality, archaeology is built on fragments, objects torn from their original context by time, erosion, catastrophe, and human intervention. What survives is rarely representative of what once existed, and when those fragments defy expectations, science does not immediately provide answers. Instead, it hesitates. The discoveries explored in this video share one defining trait. They do not fit comfortably within established historical models. They are not fake. They are not fringe rumors. They were excavated by trained archaeologists, examined by laboratories, and documented in academic records. Yet each one introduces a problem, something that current explanations struggle to fully resolve. In some cases, the problem is technical. A burial method appears far more sophisticated than expected for its time. A preservation process occurs without known chemical intervention. A structure or object implies planning, symbolism, or engineering that exceeds conventional assumptions. In other cases, the problem is human. Who were these people and why were they treated differently in death? Why do certain bodies receive extraordinary care, while others are sacrificed, sealed away, or erased entirely from written history? And why do some discoveries provoke not only scientific debate, but also fear, resistance, and deep cultural tension among the living? Modern archaeology tends to favor caution. When evidence is incomplete, researchers avoid definitive conclusions. Hypotheses are proposed, tested, revised, or abandoned. This restraint is not a weakness, it is a necessity, but it also means that some discoveries remain suspended in uncertainty for decades, sometimes longer. The 10 cases that follow occupy that uncertain space. They range from ancient Egypt to frozen Siberia, from imperial China to the ruins of Mesoamerica, from modern war graves to high mountain caves where time seems to have stopped. Some challenge our understanding of technology. Others confront our assumptions about ritual, power, belief, and the limits of the human body itself. Taken together, they reveal a simple but unsettling truth. History is not wrong, but it is incomplete. And when the missing pieces surface, they rarely arrive with explanations attached. 1. The square-masked mummy of Egypt. Inside the vast collections of ancient Egypt, few objects unsettle visitors the way this mummy does. At first glance, it appears ordinary, linen-wrapped, rigid, silent, resting as countless others do. But the moment one looks closer, something feels wrong. The face is not shaped like a face at all. It is sealed beneath layers of linen arranged into perfect concentric squares, stacked with mathematical precision, as if geometry itself were being used to erase a human identity. This mummy dates to the Ptolemaic period, roughly between the late 4th and early 3rd century BCE, a time when Egypt was wealthy, cosmopolitan, and deeply invested in funerary ritual. X-ray examinations reveal the body of an adult male, preserved according to elite standards. The organs were carefully removed. The wrappings are dense, symmetrical, and meticulous. Everything about the burial suggests status, resources, and deliberate intent. And yet, nothing else like this has ever been found. Traditional Egyptian mummification emphasized recognizable faces. Masks were crafted to resemble the deceased, ensuring the soul could identify its body in the afterlife. Gold, paint, human features, these were essential. But here, the face is not represented, it is abstracted. Flattened into geometry, locked behind shape rather than likeness. Why? Scholars have proposed practical explanations. Perhaps the design was a rare stylistic choice. Perhaps it reflected regional traditions now lost. Others point to symbolic interpretations, squares associated with stability, order, or cosmic balance. Geometry in Egyptian thought was not decoration, it was meaning. But none of these explanations answer the central question. If the goal of mummification was to preserve identity for eternity, why deliberately conceal the face? The effect is unsettling. The squares feel less like ornamentation and more like a barrier, something meant to seal, not display. A final layer of control imposed after death. It forces us to consider a possibility rarely discussed, that not all elite burials were meant to honor the dead in the same way. Some may have been meant to restrain them. What kind of life leads to a death ritual unlike any other? What did this man represent? Power, danger, transgression, or knowledge? And if Egyptian priests believed the afterlife required recognition, what happens when the face itself is removed from the equation? Perhaps the strangest part of this mummy is not what we see, but what we are prevented from seeing. 2. The Kishtim creature of Russia. In the summer of 1996, in a small village near the town of Kishtim in Russia's Ural region, an event unfolded that would leave investigators divided for decades. Villagers began to notice an elderly woman, Tamara Prosverina, walking through the streets carrying a small bundle wrapped tightly in cloth. She treated it like an infant, holding it close, whispering to it, refusing to let anyone see what was inside. At first, neighbors assumed she was confused, clinging to a doll or an object of comfort. They were wrong. When the bundle was finally revealed, witnesses described something deeply unsettling. The being was no more than 20 centimeters tall. Its skin was dark and leathery. It had no hair. Its head was oversized, with bulging eyes and an abnormally shaped skull. The body did not resemble a typical human infant, nor did it match any known animal native to the region. The creature was alive, at least for a time. According to accounts, Prosverina fed it milk and soft food. It made faint, high-pitched sounds. It appeared fragile, sickly, and weak. Then, not long after authorities intervened and Prosverina was hospitalized, the creature died. What followed only deepened the mystery. The body was reportedly preserved, washed with alcohol and dried, unintentionally transforming it into a small mummy. Medical professionals who later examined it could not reach agreement. One pathologist stated it was not human. Another argued it might be a severely deformed infant, possibly affected by genetic mutation. Context matters here. Kishtim lies near the site of the 1957 Mayak nuclear disaster, one of the most severe radioactive accidents in history. Large areas were contaminated. Birth defects and genetic abnormalities were documented for decades afterward. Radiation-induced mutation became the leading hypothesis. Yet no definitive diagnosis was ever reached. The remains were eventually handed over to authorities and then disappeared. The only person who had lived with the creature died in a car accident in 1999. Other witnesses passed away over time. No DNA sample was preserved, no controlled study was completed. Yet, all that remains are photographs, testimonies, and contradictions. In 2018, scientists confirmed that a similarly mysterious body found in Chile, the so-called Atacama specimen, was human, suffering from rare genetic mutations. This raised a troubling possibility. Could the Kishtim creature have been the same? Or was it something else entirely? Without physical evidence, science cannot close the case, and so this discovery remains suspended between explanation and uncertainty. A reminder that not every archaeological or biological mystery survives long enough to be solved. When evidence disappears, certainty follows it. 3. The Altai Princess, the ice mummy of Siberia. High in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, the ground remains frozen for most of the year. Winds cut through the valleys. Snow preserves what time would otherwise erase. It was here, in 1993, that archaeologists uncovered a burial unlike any they had seen before. Beneath layers of permafrost lay the body of a young woman, remarkably intact after 2,500 years. Her skin had not collapsed. Her facial features were still visible. Even more striking were the intricate tattoos etched across her arms and shoulders, mythical animals rendered in flowing, confident lines, preserved as clearly as if they had been drawn yesterday. She became known as the Altai Princess. Scientific analysis revealed that she belonged to the Pazyryk culture, a nomadic people of the Iron Age. She was not a warrior, but she was not ordinary either. The care taken in her burial, silk garments, ceremonial objects, and a specially constructed wooden chamber suggested high status, possibly spiritual authority. Medical examinations told a tragic story. The woman suffered from multiple illnesses, including advanced cancer and a severe bone infection. Traces of opium indicated she may have used pain-relieving substances near the end of her life. She died young, but she was buried with extraordinary precision. Yet the most controversial chapter of her story began after her discovery. Local indigenous communities objected strongly to the excavation. According to their beliefs, the Altai princess was not merely a historical figure. She was a guardian, a spiritual sentinel placed at the boundary between worlds. Her undisturbed presence, they believed, maintained balance between the living and the dead. When her body was removed, the balance was broken. In the years that followed, the region experienced a series of earthquakes, floods, and extreme weather events. To scientists, these were unrelated geological phenomena. To the local population, they were consequences, a response to disturbing a sacred burial. The conflict escalated into public protests and legal battles. Some demanded that the mummy be returned to the earth. Others argued that scientific knowledge justified her preservation in a museum. The debate was never fully resolved. Here, archaeology collided with belief. The Altai princess forces an uncomfortable question. Does scientific discovery always take priority over cultural memory? And when communities experience loss, disaster, and upheaval after an excavation, can coincidence truly be separated from meaning? The ice preserved her body, but it did not preserve consensus. Even today, her legacy remains frozen between science and faith, neither fully surrendered, neither fully explained. 4. The Aztec Skull Tower, Huitzilopochtli. At the heart of what is now modern Mexico City, archaeologists uncovered a structure that forced a fundamental reassessment of Aztec ritual life. Beneath layers of colonial debris, near the ruins of the ancient ceremonial center of Tenochtitlan, stood the remains of Huitzilopochtli, a massive cylindrical construction formed by hundreds of human skulls mortared together into a single architectural statement. Initial counts exceeded 650 skulls. Later excavations pushed that number higher. For centuries, Spanish chroniclers had described skull racks used by the Aztec Empire as displays of conquered warriors, warnings to enemies, trophies of warfare. Archaeology seemed to confirm this narrative, until the bones were examined closely. They did not belong solely to adult male fighters. Among the remains were women and children. This discovery shattered a long-standing assumption. If these skulls were not exclusively prisoners of war, then Aztec sacrifice was not limited to military conquest. It was broader, deeper, and more systematic than previously believed. Historical records associate the skull tower with rituals honoring Huitzilopochtli, the deity of war, sun, and cosmic renewal. In Aztec belief, the universe itself required nourishment. Blood was not symbolic, it was functional. Without sacrifice, the sun would fail and existence would collapse. Seen in this context, Huitzilopochtli was not merely a display of fear. It was architecture with a purpose, a physical interface between humans and the cosmos. The skulls were arranged deliberately. Their uniform placement suggests planning, standardization, and repetition over time. Yet the presence of children complicates this explanation. What threat did a child pose to cosmic order? What role did innocence play in rituals meant to sustain the universe? Some researchers suggest voluntary offerings. Others point to social stratification, disease outbreaks, or famine-driven sacrifice. No single theory accounts for all the evidence. What remains undeniable is this: Huitzilopochtli was not chaos. It was order, terrifying, intentional order, constructed at the very center of Aztec society. And if a civilization capable of extraordinary engineering and mathematics accepted such rituals as necessary, we are forced to ask a difficult question. Were these acts of brutality or acts of belief carried to their absolute conclusion? 5. The flooded tomb of Marquis Yi of Zheng. In 1978, an accidental explosion at a construction site in central China exposed something no one was prepared to see: the sealed roof of a massive underground tomb, untouched for more than 2 millennia. What archaeologists uncovered belonged to Marquis Yi of Zheng, a regional ruler during China's Warring States period in the 5th century BCE. From the outset, the tomb defied expectations. Its scale alone was extraordinary. Multiple chambers arranged with mathematical precision, protected by thick layers of soil, clay, and charcoal intended to prevent water infiltration. And yet, when the chambers were finally opened, the entire tomb lay submerged. An ancient earthquake or flood had ruptured the groundwater table, turning a masterpiece of anti-flood engineering into a silent underwater vault. Pumps worked for hours to clear the water and mud. Only then did the most astonishing feature emerge. At the center of the eastern chamber rested a bronze coffin cast from a single piece, measuring over 3 meters in length and weighing nearly 3 metric tons. It was not assembled. It was poured, molded, and finished as one object, an engineering feat that remains difficult to replicate even today without advanced equipment. The coffin had a door. This detail stunned researchers. Doors imply passage, entry and exit, movement between states. The implication was unmistakable. The builders believed the spirit of the deceased was not meant to remain sealed away forever. But the tomb's darkness went deeper. As excavation continued, 23 additional coffins floated into view, each containing the remains of young women, most between the ages of 13 and 25. They were court musicians, sacrificed to accompany the Marquis in death. This practice of ritual burial, later abolished, was once considered an expression of loyalty and cosmic order. Surrounding the coffins were over 15,000 artifacts: weapons, chariots, lacquered objects, jade, gold, and a complete set of bronze bells, 65 instruments capable of producing precise musical tones. The bells were not symbolic. They were functional, tuned, and arranged according to complex acoustic principles. This tomb was not just a grave. It was a self-contained universe: music, servants, power, and passage into the afterlife, all sealed underground. The unanswered question is not how this was built. That much is visible. The question is, why such immense technical mastery and cultural refinement required such profound human sacrifice, and why, despite all precautions, the tomb still surrendered to water. If even the most carefully engineered eternal resting place could not resist time, what hope did its builders believe they were preserving? 6. The mysterious mummified creature of Yakutia. Deep beneath the frozen ground of Yakutia, where diamond mines cut through geological layers laid down millions of years ago, miners uncovered something that did not belong to any catalog of known life, but the discovery occurred inside one of the region's vast diamond mines, an environment defined by extreme cold, immense pressure, and ancient rock formations. Buried within compacted sand and sediment lay a small mummified creature, preserved in a state that immediately puzzled those who saw it. Its body shape defied easy classification. The head was elongated. The jaw structure appeared more reptilian than mammalian. The torso and limbs suggested a predatory animal, yet the proportions did not match any known species from Siberia or beyond. It did not resemble modern mammals. It did not resemble known dinosaurs. It appeared to sit between categories. Initial speculation was cautious but unsettled. Some observers suggested a previously unknown carnivorous mammal. Others pointed to traits reminiscent of ancient reptiles. What made the find truly disturbing was its context. The depth at which it was discovered suggested an age potentially reaching back into the Mesozoic era, a period that ended over 66 million years ago. If that estimate were even partially accurate, it would place the creature alongside dinosaurs, yet its anatomy did not align cleanly with any species from that age. Scientists quickly emphasized restraint. Without complete excavation records, controlled analysis, and verified dating, conclusions would be premature. Plans were announced to transport the remains to research facilities for detailed examination, including skeletal mapping and DNA testing. But as with many discoveries made outside formal archaeological digs, documentation was limited. Public images circulated, descriptions multiplied. Certainty did not. What remains compelling is not the claim of an unknown species, but the gap it exposes. Geological layers preserve life indiscriminately. They do not arrange fossils to fit human expectations. If evolution produced branches that left few traces or none we have yet identified, our classifications may simply be incomplete. Yakutia's frozen ground has already yielded prehistoric animals, preserved with flesh, fur, and organs intact. The environment is capable of suspending decay in ways that feel almost unnatural. So the question is not whether nature can preserve the impossible. The question is how many forms of life passed through deep time without leaving a clear record, and how many may still be waiting, sealed beneath ice and stone, beyond the reach of certainty. 7. The two mysterious mummies near Tutankhamun. The Valley of the Kings is one of the most studied burial grounds on Earth. For more than a century, archaeologists have mapped its corridors, cataloged its tombs, and traced the lineage of pharaohs laid to rest beneath its cliffs. It is a place where hierarchy is everything, where proximity to a king signifies power, privilege, and status beyond death. That is why the discovery of two previously unknown mummies near the tomb of Tutankhamun raised immediate concern. Neither individual was a pharaoh, neither possessed a royal cartouche. Their burial equipment lacked the iconography expected of kings, and yet they were interred within a zone traditionally reserved for Egypt's most elite dead, close enough to Tutankhamun's tomb to defy convention. Initial examinations suggested they were high-ranking individuals, possibly officials, priests, or members of the royal court. But here, the records fall silent. No inscriptions identify them. No papyri reference their burial. Their names, roles, and reasons for placement remain unknown. What makes the discovery more revealing is what surrounded them. Nearby, archaeologists uncovered remnants of mummification workshops, tools, jars, resins, and materials used in embalming. These were not symbolic traces. They were functional spaces where bodies were prepared for eternity. This suggests the two mummies may have been deeply involved in the funerary process itself. If so, their proximity to Tutankhamun takes on a new meaning. Rather than kings, they may represent a hidden elite, individuals whose power did not come from bloodlines, but from knowledge. Those who understood the rituals, chemistry, and symbolism of death. Those who ensured that pharaohs passed safely into the afterlife, while remaining invisible in official history. This possibility complicates a familiar narrative. Egyptian society was not ruled by pharaohs alone. Beneath the crown stood administrators, priests, and specialists whose influence rarely made it into monuments or inscriptions. Their burials challenged the assumption that only royalty mattered. Why were these individuals granted access to sacred ground without the symbols of kingship? What authority allowed them to rest near a pharaoh while remaining unnamed? In a civilization obsessed with memory and legacy, anonymity is rarely accidental. Sometimes, the most powerful figures are the ones history chooses not to name. 8. The Dulag 191 Mass Grave, Archaeology of a Modern Atrocity. Archaeology is often associated with distant centuries, lost civilizations, and ancient rituals. But sometimes, the most disturbing discoveries are not buried in antiquity. They lie just beneath the surface of living memory. Near the former site of Dulag 191, archaeologists uncovered a mass grave containing the remains of more than 500 women and children. There were no grave markers, no personal belongings, no records identifying the dead. Only bones, fractured, scattered, and silent. Dulag 191 was a Nazi transit camp operating during the Second World War. Unlike extermination camps designed for systematic killing, transit camps functioned as temporary holding sites. But temporary did not mean survivable. Conditions were brutal. Starvation, disease, and execution were common. When excavations began, forensic analysis revealed chilling details. Many skeletons bore gunshot wounds. Others showed signs of blunt trauma and untreated fractures. The victims were not soldiers. They were civilians, mostly women, children, and the elderly. People with no strategic value, eliminated simply because they were in the way. The absence of personal items told its own story. These bodies were not buried with ritual or respect. They were discarded quickly, covered with shallow layers of soil, and forgotten as the war moved on. Over time, erosion brought fragments back to the surface. What makes this discovery especially unsettling is its proximity in time. These people lived in a world of radios, trains, and modern medicine. Their deaths occurred not in mythic darkness, but under bureaucratic systems, official orders, and recorded military operations. This is archaeology confronting documented history and finding gaps even there. Records spoke of thousands dead. The ground confirmed it, but it also added detail that statistics never capture: the randomness of violence, the youth of the victims, the physical evidence of fear and haste. Unlike ancient mass graves, this site offers no comforting distance. There are no lost languages to translate, no vanished belief systems to decode. Only a question that refuses to fade. If such brutality could be organized, recorded, and still partially erased within living memory, how much easier was it for older atrocities to disappear entirely? Sometimes archaeology does not reveal mystery. It reveals accountability. 9. The copper-coated mummies of Zeleny Yar. On a remote stretch of tundra in northern Siberia, archaeologists uncovered a burial ground that seemed to defy both climate and convention. At the Zeleny Yar site, excavations revealed 11 human mummies dating to the 12th to 13th centuries, preserved in extraordinary condition despite the harsh environment. Among them were adults, children, and even infants, but it was not the cold alone that had preserved them. Their bodies were coated in copper. In some cases, copper plates covered the chest and limbs. In others, the metal had been placed directly against the body, forming a protective layer that slowed decay. The result was startling. Skin, hair, and soft tissue survived far longer than expected, creating the impression of bodies deliberately armored against time. Copper is known for its antimicrobial properties. From a scientific perspective, this offers a partial explanation for the preservation. But the question remains, why copper and why here? The people buried at Zeleny Yar were not isolated primitives. Grave goods told a different story. Among the artifacts were furs of reindeer and beaver, iron tools, jewelry, and most strikingly, objects traced to Persian origin, including metal bowls and decorative items. These finds point to long-distance trade networks stretching thousands of kilometers, connecting the Arctic edge of Siberia to civilizations far to the south. This raises deeper questions. Why were only certain individuals treated this way in death? Why were children afforded the same copper protection as adults? Was the metal purely practical, or did it serve a ritual purpose, acting as a barrier between the dead and the living world? Some researchers suggest the copper functioned as a symbolic seal, preventing spirits from wandering. Others argue it represented status or authority, marking individuals of importance within their community. But no written records exist to confirm these interpretations. What is clear is that this burial practice was deliberate, consistent, and repeated. It reflects a belief system that combined metallurgy, spirituality, and an understanding, however incomplete, of preservation. Zeleny Yar forces us to reconsider assumptions about medieval northern societies. They were not passive victims of their environment. They were active engineers of death rituals, using materials and ideas drawn from far beyond their frozen homeland. And yet, the full meaning of the copper remains unknown. Sometimes archaeology reveals not ignorance, but intention without explanation. 10. The 600-year meditating mummy of the Himalayas. High in the remote mountain village of Gue, in the cold desert of the Himalayas, there is a small temple that guards an unsettling presence. Inside a glass case sits a human body, upright, cross-legged, hands folded, frozen in a posture of deep meditation. The body is believed to be over 600 years old. What makes this mummy extraordinary is not its age, but its condition. There are no signs of chemical embalming, no resins, no linen wrappings, no artificial preservation techniques known from ancient cultures. And yet, the skin remains intact, the hair is still attached, and even the teeth and nails show minimal degradation. Scientific examinations suggest that this was not an accident of climate alone. The monk, identified by local tradition as Sangha Tenzin, is believed to have engaged in an extreme form of meditation before death, gradually reducing food and water intake while maintaining a controlled posture. As body fat was depleted and internal moisture diminished, conditions necessary for bacterial decay may have disappeared. The cold, dry environment completed the process. This explanation accounts for part of the preservation, but not all of it. Why has the body not collapsed? Why does the skin retain structure and tone after centuries of exposure? Why has decomposition not progressed in the decades since the mummy was removed from its original cave and exposed to air? For Tibetan Buddhist practitioners, the answer lies beyond biology. They believe this state represents the highest spiritual achievement, a conscious transition where the boundary between life and death is deliberately crossed through discipline and intent. To science, such claims remain unprovable. To belief, they are self-evident. What cannot be denied is that this body occupies a space where physiology, environment, and human will intersect. It challenges assumptions about the limits of the human body and the role of consciousness in death. This mummy was not prepared by others. It was prepared by itself. And that distinction makes it one of the most unsettling discoveries in the history of archaeology, not because it defies explanation entirely, but because it suggests that explanation may not be complete. When history refuses to stay complete. 10 discoveries, 10 cases that refuse to settle quietly into textbooks. A mummy whose face is sealed behind geometry instead of identity. A creature discovered in a contaminated landscape, leaving no body behind, only contradiction. A woman preserved in ice whose removal fractured not just frozen ground, but living belief. Hundreds of skulls arranged with intention at the center of an empire. A tomb engineered to resist water, yet claimed by it anyway. A creature buried in deep geological time, defying classification. Two unnamed figures resting near a king, powerful enough to be close, invisible enough to be forgotten. A modern mass grave reminding us that erasure does not belong only to ancient history. Bodies armored in copper against decay in a frozen world connected to distant civilizations. And a monk who prepared his own body for death through discipline alone. None of these discoveries proves lost super civilizations, impossible technologies, or knowledge beyond human reach. There is no single artifact here that rewrites history. That is not the point. What they reveal is something quieter and more unsettling. History is not a complete record. It is a reconstruction assembled from what survived collapse, erosion, censorship, and chance. What we call the past is shaped not only by what remains, but by what disappeared without explanation. In several cases, science offers partial answers: natural preservation, cultural ritual, engineering within known limits. In others, the evidence is incomplete. Context is missing, bodies vanish, records fall silent. And when context is lost, certainty becomes impossible. This does not weaken archaeology, it defines it. The danger lies not in asking difficult questions, but in pretending the answers are already settled. These discoveries do not demand belief, they demand humility. Because if future archaeologists were to uncover the remains of our world, fragmented, damaged, stripped of context, how confident are we that they would understand us correctly? Perhaps the most important lesson buried in these sites is not about the past at all, it is about how much we still have to learn.